You're watching the PoliticIt Podcast.
Good evening. Welcome to PoliticIt Podcast. I'm Senator John Johnson, and with me today is Kris Kimball. And Kris, you are a candidate for the state school board. You've now been nominated by the SEC, and 3 names were being forwarded to the governor for the final selection in the race to replace Molly Hart, who now is the superintendent of schools.
Thanks for
coming.
Thank you. I thank you for the opportunity. It's interesting because when you say you're a candidate for state school board, I always want to say a candidate again.
Yeah, that's true.
Because I ran back in 2024 and became the Republican nominee and then was eliminated during a primary. So I'm someone who has been vetted by the delegates who represent the people of District 7. And so when this vacancy showed up, which none of us were expecting, I was actually on a tour. I have a tour company, and I was out on tour and received a lot of phone calls and text messages about this vacancy and would I step up again. And I felt like with the new process of filling this vacancy, I really needed to make sure I was part of it because I'm one of the only candidates that had actually been vetted by the people in District 7.
Right.
And I think it's important that they have a voice in the process. So I'm actually grateful and happy that the SEC elected me as one of the 3 to go forward and be selected by the governor, and he'll make the final decision. But at least the voices of District 7 are involved in that process.
You know what? I'm really glad you brought that up because there's been some talk saying, well, why should the SEC pick this person? Why doesn't District 7? Right. Is it 7?
District 7.
Yeah. Why doesn't District 7 pick them? So I'm glad you brought that up because you actually have been vetted by District 7.
Right.
And you won overwhelmingly
Yeah, almost 66%.
Which means you were the candidate coming out of convention.
Right. Yeah, and so currently the governing documents in Salt Lake County would have the Salt Lake County Central Committee be the one to replace it. And even that, I say, should really go to the delegates of 7. But be that as it may, the current law has been changed so that we now go through the state central committee. So I had people from, which I don't know if our listeners are aware of, but that's the governing body of the Utah GOP, the state Republican Party.
The state central committee.
Yeah, so you'll have individuals from Brigham City, St. George, Cedar City, Kanab. They're all vetting the candidates that will represent people in the east side of Salt Lake County. And so it's kind of an interesting process because these people don't live or are even part of Salt Lake County.
Right. And so that law actually was just changed to make that for the statewide races, right?
Right.
And I don't know how the state school board got put into that.
And I think that should perhaps be looked at because if most state school board races are multi-county,
right.
A lot of them are. I won't say even most, but a lot of them are. But where I am in Salt Lake County, I am just nestled right on the east side, and it's all
and it's
Salt Lake
only
County.
Within the county.
Yes, and so it should be county delegates that actually do that work to replace. But that's something we could look at.
Well, and I think it brings up an interesting point. But the other interesting point I think that you've already pointed out is you were out of country. You were on a trip. You didn't campaign much to get this from the state central committee. You agreed to put your name forward, but you got elected by an entirely different set of delegates, right?
Exactly.
Some of the same people, but entirely different because they know you.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I've been involved probably close to 2 decades in looking at, as a citizen lobbyist, volunteer on my own time, but going up to the legislative body during the legislative session. I've also attended state school board meetings, local LEAs, whether I was living up in Davis County or here in Salt Lake County. So I've been involved that way, and even attending 2 different UN conferences, one in New York City and one UN conference that was hosted here in Salt Lake City in 2019. And so I've been involved in education and family issues for almost 20 years. So I've got a lot of experience that way. I was also county party chair up in Davis County, which put me on the State Central Committee for a couple of years. And so I'm very established as, a conservative voice in the Republican Party. And so there's a lot of people who know me just because of my involvement over a long period of time.
Right. And you've always, and I know this personally because we've interacted quite a bit, me being the chair of education and you lobbying a lot as a citizen lobbyist on behalf of parents and children and on education issues. So, and I've always found you to be a voice of reason, a voice of stability, and someone who really cares deeply about education policy. I
do care deeply, and my children were raised in public schools, and I attended public schools. In fact, I might be the only candidate that even filed that actually attended schools in District 7 as from grade school, junior high, high school. But you can see that our outcomes aren't where they need to be. We're having issues with our graduates, really less than 50% are proficient in core skills, and that's a problem. That our children deserve a quality education in the public realm, and so I'm very concerned about that. I've got grandchildren and this new generation coming up. We need to make sure that they have that the core skills they need to become good citizens wherever they decide to go after high school graduation. If they seek higher ed or go into internships or into tech schools or whatever they want to go into, that they're equipped to do that.
Very good. Hey, we're going to take a break and we'll come right back.
Okay.
Tired of media bias? Frustrated by political noise? PoliticIt.com cuts through the clutter, giving you real facts, clear analysis, and unbiased insight on the issues that matter most. Stay informed, stay empowered. Whether it's elections, policy changes, or breaking news, we've got you covered. No spin, no agendas, just truth you can trust. Visit PoliticIt.com today, because informed citizens shape the future. PoliticIt.com, where politics meets clarity.
Welcome back to PoliticIt. We're talking with Kris Kimball, candidate for District 7 for the state school board. And one of the things I failed to do when we started that I usually like to is let's tell our visitors, our viewers really a little bit more about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? And you kind of mentioned some of that.
Yeah.
But let's talk mainly about you for just a few minutes.
Sure. I came from a large family, and my mom was an educator. She was a teacher she went back to school after I was getting into kindergarten myself, but she was a lifelong educator and retired with more than 30 years of service, which for women, that doesn't happen too much because most women stop their teaching careers to have families, right?
Right.
But I grew up in the area that I live in, District 7, the Murray, Cottonwood area of that, holiday area of that district. It goes all the way to Draper, so it's a large geographic area. But I have always been interested in education, and again, I mentioned my children were in public schools, but what I've really been excited about is a program that was initiated back kind of in 2011 called the Patriot Camp. And it was a group of mothers back east that actually started the idea. And we learned about it here in Utah and caught on to the idea of teaching children that are in kindergarten through 6th grade about the history of America, because we were seeing that there were some gaps, and they're not hearing all the amazing stories that are involved with the founding of our country and learning about the founding fathers in good detail. In fact, I think right now most of our students only get a paragraph about George Washington. And I know when I went to school, and this is going to date me, but I had George Washington in my classroom every day I saw him. I knew he was the father of our country. And unfortunately, I don't think our children in public education get enough of that foundational material. But Patriot Camp is designed to educate our children on those founding principles of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and to meet the Founding Fathers, because there's some very talented people here in Utah who love American history, and so we have a real George Washington dressed as George. We have a Thomas Jefferson. We have Ben Franklin, and we have these individuals who come and teach little 15-minute vignettes of American history and about themselves. And these children learn these stories at a very young age, and it's integrated into them year after year. And by the time they are ready to go into junior high, they can graduate themselves and become mentors to the little children. So we want volunteers from the ages of 12 to 18 to be teen leaders to mentor these little children as they go through Patriot Camp. So it's a great tool to not only educate, but also to create future leaders as well.
You know, my wife and I got involved, and this is a little while back with the Howards from Balance of Nature, and we're actually building Liberty Village down in Hurricane, Utah, right?
Yes.
It's going to have a lot of these same experiences, but in a theme park type setting.
Yes. I'm so excited about that.
Yeah, I love, you know, and they have another group, so that's Liberty Village. They have another group called United We Stand that has come up with a whole curriculum for our grade schools and stuff, so students learn about this as part of, and they have a van that they take around, a bus that they take around to teach some of these principles. But that Patriot Camp, I mean, it's
something when I got started with this camp program, I didn't have any grandchildren at the time, but I thought down the road when I have grandchildren, I have 7 now, and every summer, Grandma, when's Patriot Camp? That's one of the highlights of their summer.
Right.
I say it is the highlight, but they love it. And you know what's great? John, they are learning outside in a park.
Yeah.
It's fresh air, they're on the ground, they're moving around, and they learn about their founders, but then they'll take a break and play games, and sometimes they'll learn what do kids play back 150, 200 years ago? What were the games that they played? And they'll sometimes customize the snacks and the treats to what children were eating 150, 200 years ago. What would their treats would have been like? And so they're having an experience that encompasses a lot of their senses, and that instills deep learning when you can encompass your senses.
Well, and I think there's a real movement in Utah towards this. I mean, I know, you know, Doug Welton had a bill last year that passed. I had my higher ed bill to bring back civic education into not only our high schools but also our universities, and you know, there's a movement across the country. I mean, you know, you think about this celebration we're going to have next year to celebrate the you know, Declaration of Independence, and I mean, what better thing can we do than to promote the unity that came in the foundation of our country? Exactly.
I'm very excited about this upcoming, excuse me, the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and it kicked off just last week up at the state capitol.
Yeah.
But it's in progress now, and we've actually, we just got back from a tour that went to a lot of those sites in New York and Boston, and people think, New York, what does New York have to do with the founding? But actually that was, Federal Hall was where George Washington took the oath of office and where the Congress met originally, before it ended up where it is today in Washington, D.C. So I'm hoping that what you say is true and that there will be this resurgence of really getting back to our founding and those core principles that were based on God's law that benefit everybody.
Well, and speaking, you talked about your mother being an educator, but I know you're an educator too, in the sense that, I mean, you own this travel company, and I've been on one of your tours to Italy, and I know the amount of time you put into studying the histories and the unique things about these tours that you take, just like the one you just finished, and to teach people, right? They're very educational. And
I found that, well, we find that people really do love learning, especially when you're able to learn on site where history took place. I mean, you can read about it, but when you, again, can engage your senses and you can see the site, whether it's a sacred church or the ruins of an abbey or whatever that you're there to visit, but you incorporate so much more when you can learn insight. Plus, you have the ability to talk to local people, and a lot of times traditions and legends are shared mouth to ear, and you can pick up things that you'd never come across in a history book just by talking to people that live in that area and that have grown up in that area for generations and generations. So,
well, one of the things I missed when we were talking about you, people need to understand you're quite an entrepreneur too with this whole travel company. How did that come to be?
Well, it's interesting how things play out, because I was invited to become a partner with Legacy Tours and Travel back around 2012, and simultaneously I learned about some classes that were being taught by a professor who was retired from BYU, and he was the world-renowned expert basically in Roman history, Etruscan history, and ancient languages, and his name was Dr. John Hall. He has since passed, but I started taking classes from him in his home, and I realized as we were going through different periods of history how much more enjoyable it would be if we combined what I was doing with Legacy Tours and actually took groups of people to these sites and study the history in person where it took place. And people have loved it. It's been a really fun genre to explore. And so, yeah, that's what I enjoy doing.
Well, anybody that's interested in tours, make sure you look up Legacy Tours and Travel. But we're about out of time. Can you just basically do a pitch of why you on the state school board? What from your background? What leads you to actually even want to do that?
Well, again, as I was saying before, it's my grandchildren and your grandchildren, because we need to make sure that we've got a quality education that is there for our children to experience, so that they can become good citizens and productive citizens in our society. That's the only way it will make. And our founders knew about this, and that's why even in the Northwest Ordinance, in Article 3 was all about education and how it needed to be based on morality and religion and knowledge. And so we owe it to our children to make sure that we're providing a quality education. And so I've been passionate about that for, like I mentioned before, almost 20 years. And the fact that I've been able to go in front of two different bodies of delegates and really have a 66% win margin, and then at the SEC almost 70%, I feel like there's a lot of people behind me that would love to see me in that position as well.
Very good. Thank you. Kris Kimball. We'll see you guys next week.